The invitation never came, though I didn't realize it until it was too late. My family's annual retreat was tradition, something we'd done since before I could remember. It was supposed to be the time we all came together, 7 siblings, parents, cousins, in-laws, even the occasional friend. I had asked my mother casually weeks before, "Are we doing anything this year?" And she had sighed and said, "We're keeping it small. Not enough space for everyone." It was so breezy, so casual, that I accepted it without question. Middle child training. Don't push, don't pry, don't take up space. So, when Mia, my friend, mentioned it like small talk, I froze. "How was the retreat?" she asked, her tone light, as if she were commenting on the weather. I blinked, feigned ignorance, forced a smile. "What retreat?" She laughed, pulled up her phone, and there it was. My sister's social media, a drone shot of a sprawling resort tucked against a glittering lake. 118 people in matching shirts lined up in rows like someone was trying to break a record. A massive banner stretched across the center, 2025 Annual Family Retreat. I recognized every face. My parents, front and center. My 6 siblings, their partners, their kids' cousins I hadn't seen in years, even the in-laws. Everyone but me. I felt the ground shift beneath me. The kind of betrayal that doesn't scream, but whispers. I sat through dinner with Mia's friends, nodded, laughed on cue, pretended to be normal, while my heart sprinted circles inside my chest. Later in the bathroom, I locked the door, scrolled through photos of lakeside brunches, bonfires, dance floors strung with lights. They had laminated name tags, coordinated outfits, a hashtag, Chala Retreat to reconnect. And I was absent not by accident, but by design. It wasn't new. At 10, I'd missed a cousin's party because it was too full. At 15, the family went to a lake house, and I learned about it after. Once, I even helped iron the t-shirts for one of these retreats, but wasn't invited to wear one. My absence had always been normalized. Still, the tears came. Not sobs, just quiet streaks down my face that I wiped away with toilet paper that shredded in my fingers. In the mirror, I didn't look angry, just blank. I returned to the dinner table, smiled through dessert, and let the silence swallow me whole. But something shifted in me that night. Loneliness wasn't being alone. Loneliness was being surrounded by people, family even, and still being treated as if you were invisible. I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. I didn't know it yet, but I was 24 hours away from doing something that would change everything. My family was loud, talented, musical, the kind of chaotic Von Trapp reboot that filled every room with harmonies. Except me. I was the only one without a voice, tone deaf and mocked since childhood. Clara the vibe killer, they'd say. Clara joke they coined for humor that never landed. They laughed at the concept of me being funny. My mother once told me gently, "You're clever, but you're not exactly entertaining." So I learned silence, smiles, pleasantness. But in private, I wrote things down. Sketches, awkward observations, little scraps of humor that made me laugh. Eventually, I tried them on stage at a dingy open mic, and to my shock, people laughed. Really laughed. For months, I kept it secret. Then one night, I told them. We were sitting after dinner, my father retelling one of his old stories, everyone playing their usual roles. I cleared my throat. "I've been doing some comedy. Stand up." They blinked, smirked, chuckled. You, my brother, laughed like I'd confessed to training for space camp at 30. My mother smiled in that pitying way. "You've never been funny, sweetheart. But it's good to have hobbies." I invited them anyway. Picked a good show, rehearsed my set. I saved them seats in the 3rd row. No one came. I crushed it that night, got applause, compliments, even a stranger saying I made them laugh harder than they had in months. But the empty seat burned in my vision. I stopped inviting them after that. It wasn't out of spite. It was survival. They never asked again. Occasionally, they'd reduce it to a punchline Clara's little comedy thing, like I was knitting hats for squirrels. Still, I hoped one day they'd see me. That's why the retreat hurt so much. Not because I expected grand affection, but because I still expected a seat. I still expected to be counted. Instead, I was erased. So when I walked on stage the night after discovering the retreat, I didn't do my usual jokes. I didn't talk about oat milk or dating apps. I talked about my family. Most comedians get into stand-up because their families laughed at their jokes, I said. I got into it because mine didn't. They actually created a category for it, Clara joked. Like a dad joke, but meaner and apparently contagious. Laughter rolled back at me warm, affirming. Last week I continued, my parents told me there wasn't enough space at the family retreat. Then they invited 118 people. The laugh that came was explosive, the kind of laugh that holds both shock and recognition. I let it breathe, then delivered the line. I guess there wasn't enough space. Not at the resort. Just in their idea of who belongs. The applause was thunder. But when I walked off stage, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like ripping out a splinter buried under my skin. Painful, but freeing. The morning after my set, my phone began ringing at 7:03 a.m. My mother's name glowed on the screen. I let it ring. It rang again and again until the fifth time when curiosity beat apathy. The moment I picked up, she didn't even breathe hello. She screamed. 10 full minutes of fury poured through the line. How dare you? Someone saw your little show. You humiliated us. Not a question about how I was not a moment of reflection, just rage that the family's image had been tarnished. It was a 10-minute set, I said quietly. I didn't name names. You didn't have to, she snapped. Everyone knows who we are. Your siblings have reputations. You're dragging us through the mud just because you didn't get your way. You mean just because I wasn't invited? I asked, dry as salt. Silence. Then she pivoted, as always, to someone else's pain. Your brother says he might lose a gig because of this. Your sister says people are calling her fake online. So you're telling me people believe me? I said. She hung up. By lunchtime, the group messages exploded. My sister sent paragraphs accusing me of betrayal, reminding me of all the times she supported me, which was laughable, considering she once told a boyfriend I was too emotionally flat to be funny. My brother recorded a voice memo, slick and self-righteous. It's toxic to bring family stuff into your brand. You've always struggled with boundaries. I typed, then deleted my reply. Boundaries like the one that excluded me from a retreat with 118 people. I didn't bother sending it. A cousin chimed in, suggesting it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe I misread something. She wrote it like my erasure was an accident, a clerical error, as if laminated name tags and matching shirts had spontaneously generated without me. Another aunt said she was praying for me. Another said I had broken my mother's heart. But none of them said sorry. None of them asked how I felt. That night, instead of replying, I filmed a video. Not a stand-up set, not a sketch, just me in a hoodie on my couch holding a mug I didn't drink from. Hi, I said. Some of you saw my last set. Apparently, it upset people. I paused, breathed, stared straight at the camera. Here's the thing. If your family tells you for 20 years that your jokes aren't funny, and then one night strangers laugh until they cry, you're allowed to talk about it. You're allowed to heal however you need to. I smiled faintly. Also, if you throw a retreat for 118 people and say there's no space for your daughter, maybe don't be shocked when she mentions it. I posted it, closed my laptop, and didn't brace for anyone's reaction. I just let it exist. By noon the next day, it had 300,000 views. By evening, 500,000. A hashtag began trending. Chas Clara said it. Strangers flooded the comments with empathy. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. For the first time, I wasn't a Clara joke. I was someone's mirror. The next morning, there was pounding at my door. Through the peephole, I saw my parents, my brother Chad, of course, standing on my porch like I was the final boss in a video game. My father's face was red, my mother's lips tight, Chad's arms crossed in his usual posture of superiority. I opened the door a crack. My father didn't waste time. "Take it down." "No hello?" I asked calmly. "You've humiliated this family," my mother said. "I didn't make you a joke," I replied. "You did. I just turned it into a punchline." Chad stepped forward. "You can't post things like this without consequences. It's defamatory." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny you didn't seem to mind when I invited you to shows you never attended. Now suddenly you're subscribers." "We came here to reason with you," my father said, glancing nervously at the neighbor's yard. "Can we come in?" "No," I said, "and if you start yelling, I'll film you and post it." Their faces froze, as if I'd brandished a weapon. "That's a threat." My mother gasped. "No," I said softly. "That's protection." They left eventually, but Chad couldn't resist one last act of condescension. 3 days later, I received an email titled, "Urgent Family Concern." It was a cease and desist letter typed in Times New Roman, riddled with typos. He accused me of defamation, threatened legal repercussions. The signature, "Respectfully yours, Chad the Enforcer." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. He had a law degree, yes, but in international trade law, and the most aggressive thing he'd ever sued was probably a broken office chair. I didn't reply. Instead, I filmed another video. I didn't name him or show the document. I just read a totally fictional cease and desist letter with dramatic background music. Apparently, I said pointing out that I wasn't invited to my own family's retreat is now a federal crime. Somewhere the First Amendment is weeping. The video exploded. 900,000 views in 2 days. Interview requests flooded in. People adored the deadpan delivery, the fictionalized signature. "Respectfully yours, Chad the Enforcer" became a meme. On Saturday, I blocked them all. Every number, every group chat, every shared playlist. Not out of malice, but because I realized the truth. They weren't trying to reconcile. They were trying to control the narrative. Not one apology. Not one, "How are you?" Only damage control. Only shame. My mother's final message before she joined the block list was simple. "You've made a laughingstock of your own family. I hope you're proud." I wasn't proud, but I wasn't ashamed either. I was free. The fallout was faster and louder than I ever imagined. By the end of the week, my video had passed 1 million views. Podcasts wanted me to speak. YouTubers dug into my family's public profiles, piecing together the retreat, the resort name, even the banner in the drone shot. One channel connected the dots in a 20-minute exposé titled, "The Retreat with No Room for Clara." My mother's Facebook was screen-grabbed. My siblings' band pages were flooded with comments. My family had wanted silence. Instead, they had a spotlight. My siblings panicked. The ones who worked in music started losing small gigs. Promoters didn't want the distraction of bad press. Ironically, that same attention also brought them podcast invitations. Suddenly, they were being asked to talk about growing up with Clara. Some accepted spinning narratives without using my name, but it was clear who they meant. One brother said on a show called Family First. Some people thrive on playing the victim. Another sister posted a vague Instagram story about betrayal. None of them mentioned the retreat. None of them admitted to the exclusion. Meanwhile, I kept creating. Not about them directly, at least not always, but about the universal wounds they had given me. Stories about being erased, ignored, written off. Observations about how loneliness feels louder in a room full of people than in an empty one. And people resonated. The comments poured in. I thought it was just me. I needed to hear this. "Clara, thank you. Strangers saw me in ways my family never had. That more than any viral number kept me going. I wasn't performing for pity. I was standing in the light finally, but my family wouldn't let go. Reporters began reaching out. Some even showed up at their house cameras in hand, asking for comment. Within weeks, my parents sold the house. Officially, they said it was downsizing, but everyone knew better. They moved to another town, quietly dragging their silence with them. One of my sisters deleted her social media altogether. Another wrote a long post about taking a break from public life. Through it all, I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just kept making videos, writing, and performing. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about finally being heard. Then came the letter. No return address typed, not handwritten. Clara, you've overreacted. We were just trying to make ends meet. Families should help each other. You hurt everyone when you shut down the retreat story. You've excluded us. You've made us feel small. It ended with my mother's name. No apology, no accountability. Just shame wrapped in font size 14. I fed it into a shredder without blinking, but not every knock on my door was poison. A few days later, my doorman called. There's a woman here asking for you. Says she's your cousin. My stomach tightened. I hadn't seen Tiffany in over a decade. She'd been exiled from family gatherings years ago after daring to call out my mother's hypocrisy during a Thanksgiving toast. Now she stood in my lobby in combat boots, a motorcycle jacket, holding a file folder. Hey, Clara, she said with a grin. Relax. I'm not here to borrow money. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. She sat with me in my apartment for an hour. We swapped stories, memory scars. Then she slid the folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, emails, bank statements. Proof that my siblings and even my mother had been siphoning money from a second account set up fraudulently under my name. They weren't just excluding me from retreats. They had been stealing from me too. Tiffany had discovered it while working for an accounting firm that had handled my cousin's records. It wasn't petty cash either. They had funneled $28,000 through a shell account labeled Clara M. Family Trust Extended. My name, my liability, not my consent. Not my. I've hated how they treated you, Tiffany said. But this is criminal. I sat there in silence, my hands shaking. Oddly, I didn't feel rage. I felt finality. Proof that every instinct I'd buried under denial had been right. They hadn't just mocked me. They had used me, lied to me, erased me while pocketing my name. Tiffany offered legal help, even contacts with journalists. But I didn't want a courtroom battle. I wanted something cleaner. I opened my laptop, typed one sentence, and sent it to every family inbox. As of today, Clara M. is not responsible for debts incurred under fraudulent family authorization. Legal counsel has been retained. I BCC'd them all. Then I gathered Tiffany's documents and sent an anonymous package to the IRS. 2 weeks later, my sister left me a voicemail, her voice trembling. Clara, we're being audited. Someone reported us. Devin's freaking out. Mom's crying. Please, was it you? I deleted the message and packed a suitcase. That weekend, I flew to Denver to give my first TEDx talk. The room was full, the lights warm. My topic, emotional bankruptcy, how families drain us and how we take ourselves back. I spoke about giving without thanks, trusting without receipts, becoming the invisible backbone no one thanked. I told them about the retreat without space for me. And when I finished, the applause was thunderous. A young woman stood in the front row, tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said. I didn't know I was allowed to stop. Neither had I. Until now. 6 months passed. Half a year since the retreat that erased me. Half a year since the video that detonated my silence into something larger than myself. Half a year since my mother screamed through the phone and my siblings wrote manifestos of self-defense. And in that time, not a single apology arrived. Not one acknowledgement of harm, only endless refrains of shame and damage control. At first, I checked my phone constantly. I expected late-night pleas, manipulative guilt trips, or one of those faux apologies that begin with, "I'm sorry you feel that way." But the messages dwindled, then stopped. The group chat went silent. Their silence wasn't peace. It was punishment, the family's favorite weapon. Yet something strange happened. I didn't miss the noise. Instead of dread, I felt space. I rejoined a gym. I started writing a story I'd buried in my laptop for years. I cooked. I laughed with friends. I slept without jolting awake to phantom buzzing. For the first time, my nervous system powered down. Peace didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Of course, the family didn't truly let go. Letters arrived dripping with guilt. My mother wrote pages about how she only ever wanted the best for everyone, how generosity had been my defining trait, how I used to be so giving. She even sent an old photograph of me at 7 years old, holding a Lego spaceship. On the back, she wrote, "Remember when you built things instead of breaking them?" I framed that photo not because I missed her, but because it reminded me of who I was before they convinced me I was broken. I built things for joy. I created not to be accepted, but to be alive. And now, finally, I was creating again. My comedy career grew. I toured small clubs, then bigger ones. My stories reached people who didn't laugh at me, but with me who didn't reduce me to a Clara joke, but found pieces of themselves in my words. After shows, strangers came up to me with tears in their eyes. I thought it was just me. I finally feel seen. That was worth more than any reluctant laugh from my siblings. But family has a way of clawing back through cracks. One night, I came home to an envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a letter written in a child's handwriting, rainbow stickers on the envelope. My niece, Riley. "I miss you. Mommy says you're not mad anymore, but she still cries. Will you come back? If I bake your favorite cookies, would that help?" The words gutted me. Riley was innocent, a child pulled into a war she didn't start. She wasn't part of the retreat. Planning wasn't in the conference calls where my name was crossed off, wasn't in the group chats full of smirks. She was just a kid who loved me. I didn't go back. I couldn't. But I did send her a book, The Little Prince, with highlighted passages about love, responsibility, and taming. Inside, I wrote, "I will always be here, just not always where you expect. You are not responsible for fixing grown-ups. You are free." It wasn't enough, but it was what I had to give. My siblings spiraled. Issa faced eviction. Her landlord filed public notice. Devin's finances collapsed under the weight of his fake consulting write-offs. My mother still sent letters laced with nostalgia and manipulation. But I didn't engage. I didn't press charges. I didn't scream. I simply stepped aside and let their consequences arrive. Instead, I built. I finished my novel Dinner at 6, a story of conditional love. My publisher cried when they read it. They said it felt like a confession turned revolution. On the dedication page, I wrote 2 names. To Melanie, my ex-best friend, who once said my laughter saved her during her darkest days. And to Riley, because innocence deserves to be honored. As for me, I kept moving forward. I began dating someone new, Julia, a social worker I met after my TEDx talk. She didn't want anything from me but honesty. When she asked, "How are you?" I believed she wanted the real answer. She was the first person who looked me in the eye and said, "You didn't break your family. You broke the system that was crushing you." And she was right. Because here's the truth. No one tells you sometimes healing doesn't look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like a blocked number. Sometimes it looks like saying no without justification. Sometimes it looks like burning down the foundation built on guilt and walking away while the smoke rises behind you. I didn't lose my family. I lost their version of me. 2 months after Riley's letter, another envelope arrived. This one, plain white, no stickers, no childish handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photo tucked in. The letter was from my brother. I know I ruined everything. I should have stopped it. I didn't. I was scared of making things worse, and instead, I made them unbearable. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that I am sorry. The photo was of us as children, maybe 8 and 10, at a summer barbecue in the backyard. My face was smeared with ice cream. He was laughing, wiping my cheek with his sleeve. We looked happy, untouched by the cruelty that would follow. For a long time, I just stared at that picture, torn between grief and nostalgia. But then I slid it into a drawer beside my mother's letters. I didn't tear it up, didn't throw it away. But I didn't call him either. Healing doesn't always mean reopening doors. Sometimes it means locking them gently and walking away. After that, the silence became permanent. The group chats went dark. The manipulative messages stopped. The smear podcasts faded away. My family folded inward, retreating into the shadows of their own making. I didn't chase them, and they didn't reach for me. Instead, I filled my calendar with things that mattered. Dinners with friends, hiking trips, stand-up tours that sold out small theaters, writing sessions where my words poured out without the fear of being dismissed. Life became full, vibrant mine, and the comedy kept blossoming. On stage, I spoke about boundaries, about family, about the absurdity of being erased while your existence funds the party. Audiences didn't just laugh, they nodded, they clapped, they recognized themselves in my stories. After one show, a woman pressed my hand and whispered, "I thought I was broken. You made me feel whole." That meant more than any family recognition ever could. Months later, I celebrated my birthday in a small way. No grand dinner, no waiting for empty seats to be filled. Just me, Julia, and a few close friends. We ate, we laughed, we lit a cake, and when I blew out the candles, I whispered a single word: freedom. It wasn't about wishing. It was about gratitude. I thought of Riley often, of how one day when she's older, she'll see the truth. Maybe she'll read my book. Maybe she'll watch an old clip of mine online. Maybe she'll find me herself. And when she does, I'll be here. Not as the erased aunt, not as the family scapegoat, but as a whole person who chose herself. Because that's what I finally understood. Love isn't unconditional just because people share your blood. Real love is reciprocal. It's nurtured, chosen, protected. What my family offered wasn't love. It was dependency disguised as tradition. Control dressed as harmony. And I was done mistaking it for something it wasn't. One night, while packing for another tour stop, I opened my journal and wrote a list titled, "What I Will and Won't Accept." At the top, I wrote, "I will not accept exclusion disguised as tradition." At the bottom, I wrote, "I will protect my joy as if it were gold, because it is." I folded the page and taped it to the inside of my closet door, not as a reminder of them, but as a reminder of me. Because the truth is, I don't need a laminated name tag to prove I belong. I don't need a seat at their table. I've built my own table, one wide enough for laughter, honesty, and people who see me. At this table, I'm not a punchline. I'm not a forgotten seat. I am the host, the guest, the main character. So when I raise my glass now, it's not to the family who silenced me. It's to the woman who finally said enough and meant it. To Clara, to me, to freedom. And if you've ever felt erased, forgotten, or told you didn't belong, let my story be proof. You do. Maybe not at their table, but at yours. And that's enough. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below, because your voice deserves to be heard too. And